Thank you, Reverend Malcolm. I think what you're seeing is the beginning of a new civil rights initiative by the younger generation in this country. And at the rally in a few minutes, you'll see how a new generation is able to articulate the kind of future they want for our country, the kind of shift of power they want from the corporate behemoths to the people of this country, which is a shift of power that is a prerequisite for any semblance of a functioning democratic society. We've all been witnessing the Democratic National Convention in the last few days. The Democratic Party is having a party. And it's a party that is funded by $16 billion of taxpayer money, compliments of the Democrats and Republicans in Congress. And the same amount of money will go to the Republican convention. But there are other funders of this convention that indicate just how indentured this former party of the working people in the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Harry Truman has devolved into a corporate indenture institution, dialing for the same corporate dollars that the Republicans have been dialing for. Hospitality suite after hospitality suite is surrounding this convention with wine, food, desserts, entertainment, honorary awards. These hospitality suites know why they're there. The drug companies know why they're there. They want to maintain high prices. The oil companies know why they're there. They want to maintain high prices. The banks know why they're there. They want to be bailed out. The insurance companies know why they're there. They don't want full Medicare for everyone, replacing their greed and their power and their denial of claims by needy patients. And so the corporate merry-go-round has hitched its wagon to the Democratic Party. And the rhetoric of the Democratic Party is responding accordingly. When was the last time, apart from Mr. Edwards, have you heard leading Democrats actually talk about the poor? They talk about the middle class, which is shrinking into the swelling pool. The poor represent 100 million Americans, the bottom of the income ladder. These are the people who do the most dangerous work, clean up after us, harvest our food. These are people who help raise our children, take care of our ailing parents. These are the people who are underpaid, overcharged, redlined, excluded, disrespected, laid off arbitrarily, and otherwise marginalized politically. Their plight and their very description are never mentioned in the rhetorical whirlwinds that we're hearing at the Democratic National Convention, nor will we hear it at the corporatist Republican Convention. But the poor are always called on, far more disproportionately, to do one other thing in this country, and that is to fight this country's wars. If you look at the soldiers who have died in Iraq, and you look at their pictures that the newspapers have been printing, these soldiers are overwhelmingly from the ranks of Latinos, African Americans, and poor whites. In other words, it's an economic necessity. There are no other opportunities to gain their bread and butter, to get various skills that might get them jobs after their military service. And yet, these are the people who are represented by a tiny fraction of the wealth in our country and income in our country. These are the people who come home to higher unemployment, to the lack of care for their health problems and their traumas. These are the people who we must give the highest priority of political responsiveness. Because politics must be about the central issue of power. And that means in our country, corporate power. The dialogue must extend into more debates, and not just by the captive corporation called the Commission on Presidential Debates, which is controlled and was created by the Republican Democratic Party to make sure that no one else is on that stage, that the networks relay to 40, 50, 80, 90 million Americans, the gateway to millions of American voters, the only gateway to millions of American voters by third parties and independent candidates who don't have the billions of dollars to spend on purchased media. The public dialogue that's necessary is one that does not just relate to dissent and resistance. In the old days, third parties and independent candidates paved the way for the greatest social justice movements in our country's history. But when they started out, what they were proposing and advancing were only supported by a minority of the American people. The abolition of slavery, the women's right to vote, a fair deal for the industrial workers, adequate protection for the farmers against the rapacious banks and railroads of those days. Dissent in our history is the mother of essence. Almost everything that we like about our country has proceeded from dissent. And yet we are living now in the greatest communications age in the history of the world, and the most restrictive access to the people of the world. We are rationing debates. Why is our country allowing the rationing of debates in a presidential year, where the politics of avoidance practiced by the Republican Democratic parties have excluded the major reforms, redirections, and resurgences that will make this country fulfill the human possibilities of all its people and stand proud before the world. We don't ration weather reports. We don't ration entertainment. We don't ration sports. Why are we rationing debates? Because that is the ultimate controlling process to block the expression of the First Amendment, the right of free speech, the right to petition, and the right to assemble, which is at the core of running for elective office. That's the essential issue that must be presented to the mass media. It is already understood by the independent media. They understand the First Amendment. Their sense of newsworthiness is not gauged by who has the most money or who has the most celebrity status. It's gauged by who responds to the felt and perceived needs and injustices and realistic hopes of the American people in their role as workers, consumers, patients, farmers, migrant workers, people who are being run into the ground because their only sin is that they are powerless and voiceless and excluded. Today, we see dissent from third parties and independent candidates on areas that are supported by a majority of the American people. Not as in the 19th century, a minority. But today it is more difficult to get on the ballot, more difficult to get debate, more difficult to reach people, given comparable technologies, than it was in the 19th century. Remember, there was no radio and TV in the 19th century, so no matter how rich you were, you couldn't completely dominate the audience and exclude everyone else. You had to actually put up posters, even if you were wealthy. You had to go around on the trains and campaign.